Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 309 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. It's Blue Jays Talk for All, brought to you by JaysFromTheCouch.com. Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome back to another week of Blue Jays Talk. We're so excited you're tuning in, whether it's live on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We stream live every Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're tuning in live, don't forget, share your questions and comments and all that stuff, and you could be part of the show because it's Blue Jays Talk for All, not just us. We'd love to hear from you as well. And of course, the audio version of this podcast and all 308 previous episodes can be found anywhere you find quality podcasts. You'll find Jays from the Couch, so give us a subscribe and a rate and review and all that fun stuff. We'd be forever grateful. I'm your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at JFtC. We've got a great episode for you. We're going to look at some MLB rule changes in our MLB Minute, and we are going to dive into what should be a very fascinating conversation regarding the Blue Jays starting rotation. We know what it looks like now. We don't know what it could look like in the playoffs. We could guess, but you got to get there first, and that's where we're going to focus our energies tonight on the Blue Jays starting rotation and how they're going to get through the next few weeks into the postseason. And to help me do all of that, I can't do this every week without these two, so I'll bring in my co-host as always. First of all, host of the On Feck Circle, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's the Feckless Wonder himself, Steve Feck. Good evening.
Good evening, Shaun. And just to remind listeners again, the more questions you post up, the less chance that I may get to talk, so it's a win-win for you. So I highly recommend it.
I mean, technically he's not wrong. So.
No. I mean, hey, I'm nothing if nothing honest. So
it's true. And helping us to get into all of this stuff this week, as always, host of Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Karen Suter. Good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Shaun. Good evening, Steve.
Oh, we've got a great episode. I'm very excited because we're going to, after we do the normal MLB Minute and then the meat of our discussions, we've got our fake news, and it's I've got some good ones. Steve's got some, and it's going to be fun. And Karen gets to sit and take the high road and just judge us. And this is why I really believe this is why people should be tuning in to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, because yes, we sound great and it's a great show and it's enjoyable and all of that stuff, but you really add another element when you're watching live and you get to see the looks on mostly Karen's face when Steve says something, and sometimes I'll even say something that gets Karen gets a reaction out of her. But I'm telling you, the live visual stream of our show is definitely worth watching, for sure. So we've got our MLB Minute leading off this week, and this week, Steve did up a post, again, the MLB Minute. Funny how that worked, on JaysFromTheCouch.com, talking about rule changes, and, the bigger bases and the pitch clock and all that stuff are coming next season, the banning the shift and all that foolishness, because, baseball will all of a sudden be better after that. But we also have some other rule changes that we'd like to maybe perhaps talk about. So I know which one I'm going to talk about, but each of us takes 1 minute to wax poetic about MLB rule changes. This week, of course. Next week it'll be something different. But 1 minute. We'll start with you, Stephen, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Away you go.
Now, you probably wouldn't expect a guy that's always get off my infield grass throughout all the podcasts and his own show embracing these rule changes, but I'm really, really excited about it. Having seen it in play when they had the MLB Network minor league featured game when it was all in there, I think they're all going to have great benefits to the quality of the game. The shift is annoying. Pitch clock should have been here 10 years ago. But I'm actually excited about the bigger bases because I really think you're going to see more aggressive base running because the fielder doesn't have to worry about get run over, but also is giving you a clear path, so you're not going to have a lot of pull-up leg injuries like you have now. But you're also going to have the bases because they're bigger. Technically, they're closer together now, which means that split second between a safe and an out call on a stolen base or trying to advance is
Could
that
be.
so.
Could be. Karen, your 1 minute. It starts now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Steve there. I think all of the rule changes will be good. I'm I'm most disappointed about the one that they aren't bringing in, and that's automated balls and strikes. Oh my goodness! Another reminder just yesterday of how badly an umpire can influence a game outcome, which should never ever be allowed. But of the ones that they are doing, I think I'm looking forward to losing the shift. The Blue Jays shift a lot. And I find myself, when a game is in progress, really getting frustrated and commenting, whether I'm there with my husband or whatever, saying, oh, I wish they would stop shifting so much. I mean, maybe the numbers say that it benefits them, but in my recency effect, I notice when it backfires on them and it stays in my head. So I think a straight up defense, just let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. I actually started shifting in my own beer league slow pitch team, and it's amazing. I got to tell you, first of all, it does not extend our games, but we were using it, and I'm thinking about this one guy in particular. He is a monster, and we put everybody. I'm not even joking. We keep one outfielder because you get four. We get one outfielder in right field, and then we get a first baseman. Everybody else is on the left field side of second base, and he still hits it through everybody. He's just so it's Anyway, it doesn't take any longer though. Just so we're clear, right? This is clearly not about pace of play, and that's a big difference, right? When we're talking about the game is slow, blah 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 blah. This isn't just about speeding up the game. This is about scoring and whatnot. Anyway, I think I've used a minute before I get my minute. That's the glory of being the host, right? It's just, but like Mel Brooks says, it's good to be the king. Anyway. Yeah, so the one thing, as Steve did mention, the one rule change that I am looking forward to, I think the stolen base is an element that has just disappeared from baseball. And I think that's a perfect example of analytics kind of ruining the game a little bit, in a sense that, they kind of well, what's the value? What do you get out of a stolen base? And is it worth the risk and all of that stuff? And I think that teams have shied away from it, which is unfortunate. And because you've got guys who, I think Bo, Lourdes, even Teoscar could steal 20 bases if that was part of the game plan, but they don't anymore. And that's something that I would love to see come back. A stolen base is exciting, and I don't care what anybody says. And it has the potential for the ball being thrown into the outfield, which is great. It's just more excitement in the game than that sense. But you got to be a fan of baseball to appreciate those kind of things, I think. Anyway, I won't continue because I did already steal another minute. But and yeah. Anyway, I'm all worked up about rule changes now, and I want to scream at Rob Manfred and the other one.
But why? I mean, seriously, why? Well, what is it? I know this wasn't on the agenda, but what is it that upsets you so much that you can't embrace things that are going to change? And honestly, these rule changes are going to they're going to neutralize the analytic epidemic that is rampant in Major League Baseball.
Okay, and that's fair. And I don't have as big an issue with analytics as you do. I have an issue. What my real problem with all of this is that we have an ownership group made up of 30 owners of baseball teams. They're not baseball players. They're not baseball people for the most part, right? These are businessmen. And that's what's driving Major League Baseball right now. Think about the pitch clock, okay? If a pitcher cannot take as much time between pitches, they're going to get tired faster. They may get hurt, first of all, but they're going to get tired faster. They won't last deeper. Things like that. That all down the road will lead to lower salaries, because I think Major League Baseball owners got really scared with salaries going 20, 25, 30 million a year for one pitcher. And I think that's part of it. The other thing I have a problem with is that they're manipulating the game of baseball to create an outcome. And, and Karen, you mentioned it when you talk about the balls and the strikes, and I think you're referring to the 69% accuracy rate of yesterday's home plate umpire. But to me, this is an intentional manipulation of the game to create an outcome, which is more runs. That I have a problem with, because they believe that this is all about, that's what young fans want to see. Well, why do they want younger fans? Because fans are getting older. They want to be able to replenish that supply of income. And if they think this is what it's going to take, that's what they're going to do. And so to me, it all boils down to owners wanting more money and changing a game to get that. I don't have a problem with changing the game, period. Like the elimination of the stepping out of the box. I'm okay with that, because it doesn't impact the outcome of a game the way other things do. Anyway, so Steve, that's my rather long-winded answer to your question.
And I'm only going to counter that with, again, having someone that has pitched at competitive levels, someone that has been a coach at the high school level and with amateur players. From a kinesiological standpoint, it actually benefits a pitcher and reduces arm and especially shoulder injuries with a quicker pace of throwing the baseball. So that, and again, this isn't the Dr. Oz show. Okay. So we're not going to go into all those details, but it actually benefits them.
I would love to read that, because I would be shocked if it did. You think about a Robbie Ray or a David Price, who certainly sound like their max effort. Venus and Serena Williams on the mound there. They're just, you know what I mean? Like they're grunting away, and David Price, and Rob, what, there's the solution right there. Major League Baseball can get revenue streams from things like adult diapers, because of what it sounds like they're doing. And, they're trying so hard. You can't tell me that giving all of that effort and then having to do it again quicker, you can't tell me that's not going to be harder on your arm. And even if it isn't, you can't tell me that they're not going to, they're going to last just as long, if not longer, in a game, because they may not be, the wear and tear on the arm may not be as bad to cause an injury, but you can't tell me that they're going to be less tired in a game, right? Then, of course they will, right? So
they will be less tired, but again, what we'll do is on one of the on-FX circles, I'll break out all the medical details on that. But honestly, it's actually not that big of an issue.
And I hope so. I would love to be wrong. I just don't. It doesn't happen too often. So.
And the best thing is the death of the launch angle. Launch angle is dead.
Oh, launch angle is here to stay, whether we like it or not.
And exit velocity and all of it. Yep. Yeah.
We're not getting rid of it, but again, as Buck Martinez said in his book, I think analytics helps. It has a place. It enhances the understanding of the game, but it's not, nor should it be, the only thing that you rely on. But when you're evaluating a player or whatever, there's more to it than that, and not everything can be quantified, as I say like a million times.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but that is rather perfect a perfect way to describe the purpose of analytics, and it came from Buck Martinez. It might be my favorite thing he's ever said. Just to enhance your understanding of the game. That's like, it doesn't get any better than that. Unfortunately, though, in a business, that means manipulating that data to get an outcome. But anyway, I've already said that. We're going to move on. Actually, what we are going to move on to is we're going to talk about the starting rotation and how it looks heading into the final days of the season, because at this point, every game matters. Every game is crucial. And when the Blue Jays make the postseason and the postseason starts, they'll be at an advantage because they've already played a month of postseason games, because that's what it's going to feel like, right? It's like all important. But in the playoff series, in a 3-game series, you need your 3 starters. In a 5-game series, you might need another one, depending on off days and things like that. But to get there, the Toronto Blue Jays are going to need all of their starters. They're going to need Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman and blah, and so on and so on. And it's the so on that's the real, the real issue, if you will. So I guess, Steve, I'll start with you. And excuse me. When you look at this Blue Jays rotation from 1 to 5, I mean, do you think we're set up? First of all, let's just go general, and then we'll narrow it down. But do you think they're set up to continue to make a run at the postseason? Is their rotation? There's the question: is the rotation good enough to withstand a 1-month playoff battle before the playoffs even start?
Well, that question really should have been asked in May, but yes, it is, because the Blue Jays are making the playoffs. It's just a matter of where they're going to slot now. I mean, I know a lot of people think, well, it's only 6.5. Or 6 games. We can catch the Yankees. Or the Blue Jays are a wild card team. It's just a matter of how they're going to slot 1, 2, or 3. Once you get into the playoffs for the first round, you need 3 starters. The Blue Jays have 3 starters. So I'm not too worried about that. But you also need to set up your bullpen roles leading into that playoff. Because, again, if you have – we really only have 4 starters right now. But let's say we had an effective 5th starter. 2 of those guys are going to pitch out of the bullpen in the wild card round. So what the Blue Jays could really do, and which I think they're going to do, I think this is what Schneider really thinks is the way to go, is they're going to use an opener in that 5th slot from now to the end of the season. They're going to get their non-leverage relievers regular work, which they would not necessarily get leading into the postseason. So if anything, you are rounding out and you are setting up your pitching staff for the playoffs by using that opener as the 5th starter. Though it should be Mitch White, but that's a whole other question. The story.
Well, we'll get to Mr. White in a minute.
Right.
But yeah, that's an interesting idea. Okay, so you're thinking Alek Manoah, Kevin Gausman, Ross Stripling, and then bullpen day.
Well, you got to put Barrios in there too, but yes.
Barrios,
yeah.
I forgot about Barrios. How could I forget?
It's PTSD. That's what it is. But no, but Barrios is in there.
No, I hit the hardest ball I've ever hit off of Jose Barrios. It was great. So Karen, Karen, we have almost a month of playoff games before the playoffs even start, right? So I'll ask you the same question: is this Blue Jays rotation set up to withstand that kind of intensity?
Overall, yes, I think so. It's just it's unfortunate because the Jays, they've really gotten on a roll, and it's gotten to the point where the 4 actual starting pitchers they have that take the ball at every 5th game or whatever it is, those guys I pretty much trust. those guys, when it's Gausman or Manoah or Stripling or Barrios, I feel like they're going to go out there and give the Jays a good chance to win that game. It's just really unfortunate that they don't have a fifth starter right now. I mean, they signed Kikuchi. He had a good month of May. And for the most part, we know, unfortunately, he just hasn't been reliable. So they traded for Mitch White, and his numbers with the Dodgers, they were decent. I mean, he's not a staff ace, but he certainly looked like someone who could be a capable fifth starter. And in his first few starts with the Jays, that's what he was. Unfortunately, his last few games, they just haven't been good, and the team felt they had no choice but to option him. And it's just really unfortunate because at this point they don't really have a better option, and essentially 20% of their remaining games in the regular season are almost a guaranteed loss. So then the pressure is that much more on the other four starters and the team as a whole to try to be as close to perfect as they can be in that other 80%, because the more they can win at this time, the better they are. The more, I mean, the chances are almost certain that they will make the playoffs, but it's that playoff seeding. Do you want to be the number 3 seed going into Cleveland or whatever? Do you want to be the number 2 seed and have to play Seattle or Tampa on the road? I'd rather that they be hosting the series. So everybody's got to step up and give the most they have to give.
Right. And it's funny because both of you have said they are a playoff team. They're in a position and all of that stuff. But every time, and I know logically that's true, but every time I look at the standings and see that they're in that last wild card spot and that Baltimore is not Baltimoring, that makes me a little nervous. And I'm not suggesting that the Toronto Blue Jays are not a playoff team. They are. They're a playoff caliber team. However, I do get nervous every time I look at the standings. And so when I then go from there and then I look at the week's pitchers, depending on where we are in the rotation, that feeling does not go away. And so anyway, so when we think about that rotation though, and how good it has to be, Steve, I know we kind of touched on this, I believe, last week, but Alek Manoah and his innings total and all of that stuff, people are making a big deal, but it's not going away. Okay, so, and sort of like we were talking earlier about less time to rest between pitches, he's now had more innings than he's ever had. And you've seen the fluctuation in numbers a little bit as well. Now, of course, the adrenaline of incredibly important games is something that I can just picture Alek Manoah just chomping at the bit to take on, and I get that. But Steve, Alek Manoah, how much more could he possibly have in the tank? And I think the real bigger question is, because there's no way to know the answer to the first, but the second question is, what do we really see the Blue Jays doing with him down this little stretch here? Because it's not like David Price, where they could just ride him everywhere and for 1,000 innings before he becomes a free agent. They're going to have this guy for a while. So, Steve, how do they navigate the next few weeks and then the postseason with Alek Manoah?
Every pitcher needs to be handled differently. Mm-hmm. I mean, down through the years, there have been Blue Jay pitchers that you really could only rely on going 6 innings, and then they were done. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about 3 times through the order or any of the other, chicken bone witch doctor stuff that people come up with, well, you can or can't pitch a pitcher. Some pitchers handle their fatigue and they channel their fatigue in a way that keeps them effective. Okay, is Alek Manoah down the stretch and possibly even in the playoffs, so that you referenced, the adrenaline rush? I can't imagine what he's going to be like in his first playoff spot. I mean, honestly, I just can't imagine what he's going to be like. But some pitchers are just durable that way, and you can just put them out there, and you go back to like the Scherzers and the Verlanders, okay, different body pitchers, but I mean, AJ Burnett, Roger Clemens, you knew that they could just go out there and pitch effectively. So I don't worry about the Manoah innings deal. I understand that that's what everybody has been reading for the last 20 years. But you have to remember, too, that Alek Manoah, pitched college, then pitched in the summer wooden bat leagues all through his college career. And he even played in some, amateur elite leagues in the winter. So he's been pitching year-round now pretty much since his senior year in high school, so I don't worry about that. I mean, if this was Ross Stripling, who's not used to pitching that many innings, he's always been a 5-6 inning guy, okay. But, Alek Manoah is just he's a beast. He's a different kind of pitcher, so you need to, you don't compare Tim Mesa to Jordan Romano in the bullpen. I mean, Tim Mesa pitches, it seems, all of the time. He's always pitching, but a lot of times they pick it where it's only maybe one out at the end of an inning or whatever it is. Where Jordan Romano, you could if he had his way, he would probably pitch every day. He would do the Mike Marshall and pitch, 150, 160 innings if you let him. Mm-hmm. So they have to manage him. So I don't worry about it whatsoever with Manoah.
Mm-hmm. Now it's interesting because you mentioned some names that were, and Roger Clemens stuck out to me because I think they share a similar-ish body type in that, they're a little husky, as we we broad-chested people like to say. But Roger Clemens pitched in a time where the analytics on pitching weren't so crazy, and it was, hey, how do you feel today? You're going, right? And we never would have thought, Roger Clemens is up around, however many innings, and what are we going to do to limit his innings and things like that? We never would have thought of that. And that's not rightly or wrongly. It is what it is. But Karen, when you now hear what Steve had to say about Alek Manoah and the fact that, and I like the comparison between Ross Stripling as well, because that guy hasn't to date been kind of a starter and using starter innings. So Karen, when you look at it, do you worry about fatigue and effectiveness with Alek Manoah through the rest of the season and beyond?
I was a little worried. I was a little more worried prior to his last one or two starts because, as I said, they always report on the velocity, and the velocity was down a little bit. But one way or another, a combination of the physical ability and the competitiveness, the mental makeup, he's finding a way to make it work. Now, I don't know if they've adjusted his between game routine at all, if he's doing less of a bullpen session, or I don't know. I don't have that knowledge. I don't want to try to speculate, but something kind of comes to mind, and Steve, it's great to hear from you about this because clearly you know a lot more things about his history than I could ever hope to know. But one thing that kind of comes to mind, and you guys know I'm very active on Twitter, and as soon as I found Manoah on Twitter, of course I had to follow him, and it was Game 2 of the 2020 Wild Card Series, and the Blue Jays were getting their butts handed to them by Tampa Bay. And Manoah went on Twitter, and I'm not saying this is word for word, but essentially what he said was, the pitching you're missing is coming. We'll be back for a good time and a long time. He wasn't kidding. There's something in his head and his makeup. He was made for this.
Mm.
And I'm going to stop crying now. I get way too emotional about these things.
And that's something I couldn't pick up on the screen. That's there it is right there. I mean, I'll give you some time to compose yourself, for God's sake, Karen. But it is interesting because where we have Alek Manoah as the subject of innings usage and all this stuff, there's Kevin Gausman, who we're like, nobody. Steve, I'm going to throw this at you. Can you recall, since you can recall every season of Major League Baseball ever, was there ever a time that comes to your mind where you have a legit Cy Young candidate that nobody's talking about? More so than Kevin Gausman right now.
That's a great question. I think every year there are pitchers where 5 years later you go back and you look at the numbers, not projected or any all that crap. You look at the actual numbers put up in games, and you say, "Man, boy, that guy was really good." Like when a contract expires or a guy retires, you go back and look and say, "Man, that 2022 season was amazing." When you look back at the effect and the impact it had. Gausman's not a flashy guy. He's a guy that, I mean, he goes out and just pitches. He's Jimmy Key. I mean, obviously he's not left-handed, but he's Jimmy Key versus Dave Steve. Dave Steve went out and it was all the throwing at you and yelling at his teammates for making errors and blah blah blah. Jimmy Key just went out. And it didn't really wow you, but then at the end of the year, you're like, I think Pat Henkin was that way too. I mean, Henkin got a Cy Young, but I mean, I think he had better years than his Cy Young years. Maybe not on record, but I think he had better years as far as making impact on games. It's you hate to say, well, maybe it's for the best that they didn't sign Robbie Ray. I would like to have kept Robbie Ray still. But, I mean, Gausman's proven everybody wrong. The last 3 years, he has proven everybody wrong. Saying, okay, you can write me off. You can say, well, yeah, but, it's an outlying year. He'll never repeat it. He's repeating it. So,
and it's just fascinating to me because back when, Pat Henkin won his Cy Young, you were not getting a Cy Young award unless you won 20 games. That was it. You better get the 20 or you're not getting it. And I remember multiple seasons, and it may have been Henkin or others who, if it was like the end of the season and they were on win number 18 or 19 and they were like, oh man, they're pitching for a Cy Young now. Those times have changed, So Karen, when you think of Kevin Gausman, and in the context of this conversation, getting us through the next few weeks and beyond, would you, obviously this is more of a playoff question, but would you kind of, if you're looking at the rotation depth charts, would you call Kevin Gausman your number one starter to lead off a series, or just to, kind of keep the good times rolling, so to speak, over the next few weeks?
Right. I mean, it's a good problem to have.
Yes.
Because you could choose him or Manoah and not go wrong. They've both done so well this season. If I was making the decision, I would probably give it to Gausman just because he's a veteran and he has a little bit more MLB experience under his belt in that way. But I mean, if it were Manoah, I have no doubt that he could handle it. Like they both, I think that's going to be a really nice 1-2 punch once they do get there. So.
Yeah, if it were me, I think I would start Gausman, and because if you win that game, the game 2 is huge, right? Yeah. And that's where I think you probably, for me, I would want Alek Manoah and all that he brings to the pitching mound, the energy, the everything, for that second game. That's how I would do it. Steve, you're nodding. I assume you agree there.
Oh, absolutely. But because again, Manoah might be more valuable in that in that second game if you lose the first. Again, I'm not saying that the Blue Jays are going to lose the first, but if you lose that first game, you want Alek Manoah because he's going to will it where the Jays will somehow win. He will, scratch and claw and whatever he needs to do. He's going to get the job done. But, going back to Gausman, you know who Kevin Gausman is? He's Mike Mussina. I mean, how many Cy Youngs did Mussina win? Not a lot. He never really won 20, except I think for his last year. I think he won 20. But other than that, he just got the job done.
Yeah.
And then everybody wrote him off saying, "Oh yeah, but he only had 16 wins, or he only had this." It's how many games did the bullpen cough up for Gausman,
and how much run support, and
right. It's just. Things happen, but he pitches and has such an impact and literally you can tell he's in control. He's like the Zen master out there. I keep waiting for him to float before he delivers his next pitch because he's just so focused and so calm. Should he be considered for a Cy Young? Yes. Is he going to get it? I think we all know the answer to that's no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So calm unless an umpire's got him upset, but then you've got Bo Bichette. So
yes.
Okay, so before we run out of time, and I feel bad because I think we're going to gloss over Ross Stripling here. He's earned that third starter. In fact, I would bump him ahead of Jose Barrios at this point. Steve, those two, do you start Stripling or Barrios first?
With all due respects to Karen's husband, Ron, Ross Stripling is so valuable in that bullpen because he can pitch every role if need be. He could close the game out if it goes extra innings or if Romano has to be brought in early. A pitcher like Ross Stripling, you need at least one of those guys in your bullpen so that if you have to bring him in the fifth or the sixth, or if you have to bring him in to get it with runners on base to get some tough outs, he needs to be in the bullpen. Barrios, it's been a tough year. And I'll be nervous if it's game 3 and you don't know which one's going to be coming out. But I start Barrios only because Stripling is going to be such an important weapon for John Schneider, and I would be shocked if Schneider hasn't already made that decision and hasn't told the front office, "Hey, you know what? We're going 1, 2, 3, and Stripling's pitching out of the bullpen."
Well, and I mean, between the two of them, it would make the most sense because he would have the most experience doing that, and he has in-season experience switching roles and things like that. So, I mean, I don't want to say he would be used to it or welcoming it. But that being said, though, Karen, what Steve is saying here is that Jose Barrios starting a playoff game, if it goes bad and you're down 2-0,
if you're down 2-0 in the first round,
it's over.
No, sorry, I meant a longer series. I apologize. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I guess my point is him starting an important game. But regardless, you got to get there first, and that's the real point of our show here. So, Karen, when you look at Stripling, Barrios, how do you kind of set those guys up?
Right. Yeah, I mean, just I was going over it in my head, and as much as 1, 2 is a tough choice for me, 3, 4 is as well, because they both got their strengths, Stripling and Barrios, and to me it's kind of a very tough call which one you'd want as your number 3 starter in the playoff rotation. But for me, Stripling's got to be in the rotation, and I wouldn't be pitching one of those guys who I consider to be my first 4 starters. I wouldn't be bringing one of them in a bullpen role unless like it's almost an emergency situation. I want them ready, because like assuming we win that series, whether it's in 2 games or in 3 games, then the ALDS say that 5 times fast, starts in just like a couple of days later. So you want somebody rested who can go out and start that game. But I think if it's up to me, I think Stripling overall has been a little more reliable this season. Barrios, to me, has been good about 2/3 of the time, and I've come to mostly trust him, but we don't really know when the not so good Barrios will rear his head, and you don't want to see that in the playoffs. So I mean, if they can get through that wild card round and he's rested and he goes out and starts game 1 of the ALDS, you're hoping he has one of his good starts, and if not so much, well, you got 4 more games.
Yeah. And
out of curiosity, then you leave Barrios off your wild card roster because he has no role.
See, that's a really good question, because if someone gets knocked out early, you can use them. I just don't think it's ideal. I mean, I think about the 2015 ALDS, and I forget who started, but between R.A. Dickey and David Price, they piggybacked each other. Whoever started that 3rd game didn't go 5 innings, but then the other one came in, and between the 2 of them, they got through that game. And I just remember Dickey after the game and him saying in the post-game interview that it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. So maybe it was he that started and Price came in relief and did a much better job. So yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I don't know that I would leave him off the roster altogether, but it wouldn't be my first choice for him to have to pitch in relief, because I want him rested and starting game 1. I mean, if you can win the series in 2 games, then hallelujah, you're way ahead of the game. But that might not be the case. You're going up against another playoff team, whoever that is, and they're not going to roll over and die. It could easily go 3 games. So,
and I'm not bringing Barrios in like halfway through the game or near the end of the game, right? Because if he's being hit hard, if that's what his issues are all season, I mean, things can change so quickly in a playoff game. The later it gets, I'm not having anything to do with Jose Barrios coming out in a bullpen role just for that reason. But anyway, now the fun question. Okay, because we have been talking about the playoffs, and I know we're supposed to be talking about the season, but now we have no choice but to talk about the season, because that 5th starter spot is not going to be an issue at any point in the postseason. Fingers crossed. But right now, we've got a whole mess of WTF starting. It's it's not even TBD anymore. It's just so Steve, 5th rotation spot at what, maybe I don't have the calendar in front of me, but about 3-4 more starts maybe. So what do you do, Steve, with that final spot after Mitch White has struggled his last 3 starts?
See, he struggled in his last 2 starts maybe, but I think overall he has pitched well, and the numbers don't support what he was doing on the mound. I mean, I would say that it may be more of a case where unfamiliarity with some of the opponents, he may have made some bad decisions that, in retrospect now, after having had bad results, he's not going to make those bad decisions again. I have no idea, and I was really trying not to bring up hashtag fire Ross Atkins, but I just did. He's made so many stupid roster decisions since 2020 until now. Sending Mitch White down, rather than giving him the experience and getting him used to pitching in big games so that he is available, he has pitched a Stripling kind of role with the Dodgers, even in the minors. To send him down to AAA where he's not going to be facing the same caliber, of competition as you are in the majors. It is the single worst decision Ross Atkins has ever made, and I didn't think that I could actually quantify it with one decision. It was a bad decision, and it's going to come back and bite the Blue Jays on the feathers, on the tail feathers. It really is. I mean, I think the only good thing about it is I do, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to talk about it in more detail on my show tomorrow, is it does allow you to get regular work for some of the middle and long relievers by using that opener for 3 or 4 starts, so that those guys are not going to be coming out being rusty. So from that standpoint, I think that's where Schneider is leaning, and that's how he's going to go. But his hand was forced. It was a bad decision to send a pitcher of Mitch White's caliber down to AAA when you don't have a better option as a PIP starter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say that it was a bad decision to trade for him, because
I love the trade,
right,
and I'd love the trade for now.
Mm-hmm.
I know Karen has different thoughts. It's maybe a longer term. And I think really they're looking at big picture rather than just 2022. Mm-hmm. But to have him there, a guy with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So Karen, what do we do with that 5th spot? I mean, it's not looking good.
I mean, you summed it up pretty well. That's more of a WTF than anything else lately. And that's really unfortunate. Like I said, and I was saying earlier today, I'm not giving up on Mitch White. I mean, they've got 4 years of team control with him beyond this season. I've seen some promising things, a couple of good outings with the Jays, some decent numbers with the Dodgers. And I'm happy that he's with the Toronto Blue Jays. I just, right now, their main focus has to be on getting into the playoffs. And, I was really hopeful that, okay, Mitch White is just good enough to be a 5th starter, and that's great. But it's not his last two starts, it's his last 3. He pitched 5 innings, then 4 innings, then 2 innings. He gave up. It was like 8 runs, 7 runs, 6 runs. I had it written down earlier. I should have written it down for the show, but he just, the bottom line, whatever these X stats are, I'm with you. Nobody wins games because of expected this or that. What was actually on the score sheet wasn't good. And unfortunately, he did not keep the Jays in the game. He didn't give them much of a chance to win. If they were a rebuilding team, I would say keep him up with the Major League Club, keep sending him out there, get him that experience, refine whatever needs to be refined. And I'm hopeful that he can be a good pitcher for them in the future. But right now, they need someone who can keep them in games and help them get into the playoffs. And he hasn't done that lately. So they didn't have much of a choice, I don't think. And it'll be interesting. I mean, assuming that they call him up for tomorrow only because they can, because it's a doubleheader. He might start one of the games tomorrow, and maybe Kirk catches Manoah, because Kirk's been catching Manoah all season, and some people who may or may not know more than I do seem to think that Danny Jansen can wave his magic wand and make a pitcher better just by catching him, and that he's that good at game calling. Someday before I die, I want to understand why a pitcher supposedly has that much, or a catcher, excuse me, has that much input and over the outcome of a pitcher. Like, isn't it the pitcher who decides what he's going to throw? Isn't it the pitcher who should know what batters, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and who creates his own game plan?
Not always, though,
I know
right?
about baseball. Maybe I know nothing. I don't know.
Well, but remember, like somebody like Mark Burley, right? Who he said he never went to a meeting. When he looks at the catcher and he throws what the catcher tells him, right? Now, there may be times where that comes from the dugout, because certain teams they'll send it from the dugout in, and then or the catcher will have memorized their plan.
If you've got a young catcher, then sure, it can be called
Right.
from the dugout. But
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know that there's any one way to do it, but I regardless though, I think that the real point is that it comes down to the pitcher, regardless of what the catcher's calling, or because the pitcher's the one who has to execute. But Steve, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's in those pre-game meetings, really, as much as what transpires on the field, that relationship between a catcher and a pitcher gets developed.
Mm-hmm.
You go back years before, maybe even before you were born, Steve Carlton and Tim McCarver.
It was.
Tim McCarver caught every Carlton start in St. Louis and in Philadelphia. And then when he got traded, I think to the Red Sox, Carlton moped the rest of the season. He didn't really pitch as well. And then they brought McCarver back. I mean, you're going over film, or you're going over game reports and scouting reports, and suddenly the catcher says something and it's clicking with that pitcher. It's like, yeah, he gets it. He gets what, even without talking directly to each other, I get it. And I think that's really where the confidence comes in. So I don't really have a problem with, personal catchers all that much. But I mean, that's where the relationship comes in. It's not necessarily in game, because Danny Jansen can catch Alek Manoah. He can. And Alejandro Kirk can catch Kevin Gausman. No problem. There's a preference between but I mean, it's not an issue, but it's that comfort level, and a pitcher has to feel comfortable.
Right.
And that's why.
Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, and that's why sending Mitch White down was stupid, because he's not going to feel comfortable coming up with, even if he stays up when he comes up for the doubleheader, he should have been here all along. That comfort level happens every day, every meeting, every bullpen session, and doing it in Buffalo in September in a pennant race is not helping you. You need to do it at the major league level.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with having that kind of personal catcher thing, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that Josh Tolle is like the president of the Personal Catchers Association. It kept him employed for years.
Right. Well, let's not forget too about Mitch White. He was only optioned about 5 days ago, so they can bring him up only for tomorrow. They have to send him back. He has to spend 15 days minus, like other than the doubleheader, he has to spend 15 days in the minors, unless someone goes on the IL, knock on wood.
Yeah.
Once again, dunce cap fitting, Ross Atkins. Dunce cap fitting, Ross Atkins.
Oh, man. Anyway, actually, this might be a good time, because we are just about out of time here, but we want to hit up some fake news for our audience momentarily here. So again, if you're new to the show and you're not familiar with our fake news segment, let me explain how this works. Everything we say is made up. It's completely fake, hence fake news. And it's all meant to be fun, enjoyable, and so on and so on. All right, so sit back, relax. Jays from the Couch proudly presents fake Blue Jays news. Steve, over to you.
Well, now you got me riled up. Let me start with Ross Atkins is a competent major league general manager. The biggest fake news item we will ever give on this show. But I digress. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. made a highlight reel play on Wednesday night's game versus the Orioles, charging a slow roller down the line by Adley Rutschman. Vladdy flipped a throw behind his back to a racing Alek Manoah, who beat Rutschman to the bag. So the fact he threw behind his back really threw me off, admitted a giddy Manoah after the game. But that was a dope play. But the most amazing play of the week came from the left arm of Jays millionaire reliever, Yusei Kikuchi. Ahead in the count versus Rangers catcher Jonah Heim, Kikuchi started his motion, brought the ball just behind his ear in a perfect L angle, then fired a fastball right down the middle to catch a surprised Heim looking. I watch a lot of video on opposing pitchers all the time, said Heim. I've never seen Kikuchi throw a perfect strike, ever. When Kikuchi was told of Heim's comments, he smiled and said through his translator, just a bit over the plate. There will be a twist to the Blue Jays' 50-50 drawing for the series finale against the Rays. Instead of drawing a winning number, fans will be asked to accurately predict how many outs and how many pitches the opener in that game will be able to record. And if the 2022 season has taught us anything, the possible right answers to that question are endless. Over to you, Shaun.
Thank you very much, Steve. In other fake Blue Jays news, Jays from the Couch has learned of some updates coming to the Sky Dome renovations, and it's a big one. It's a good one. It will include an arcade-style area. You'll be able to play all your favorite classic games with the Blue Jays twist. Pac-Man will feature Vlad Jr. going around gobbling up baseballs, probably from bad bow throws. But if Vlad chomps on the wrong ball, it'll release the ghosts of ML MVP perennial candidates Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, and Aaron Judge. As well, there will be another addition. That old punching bag. I forget what it's called. It's actually got a name, I'm sure, but the old punching bag, that hangs down. Anyway, it's going to have a new spin. The bag will be shaped like a baseball and will have a Jose Barrios backdrop as though he's throwing the ball. The good news is you'll get lots of tickets because everything Barrios throws gets hit super hard. And finally, Steve is going to like this one. Finally, the popular whack-a-mole game will see an upgrade. Instead of whacking moles, though, you get to hit sound bites from Ross Atkins. The same ones, just random order, just all the time, just like real life. And that has been fake Blue Jays news. You can see why we have fun with this. I mean, really. Before we head out, I do want to throw in our questions. We've had some great viewer participation here. And I'm going to throw that up here. So first of all, Christian Rao, the Rao Report, and Slasher Sports. Happy Monday to my favorite Blue Jays folks. Hello, Christian. I hope you and yours are doing well. And Dulcimeris watching on YouTube. I didn't like the Whit Merrifield trade. Something's wrong with him this season. I miss Max Castillo since he could eat innings, either as a long reliever or a back and rotation guy. Even if there's nothing wrong with Whit Merrifield, I would agree with you there, Dulcimeris. I mean, hey, but next year, bigger bases. Whit Merrifield's going to steal 47 bases. You'll see his value then. Mitch White is probably a long reliever the rest of the season, and then he can retool in the offseason and try out for the rotation in 2023 spring training. That right there is my plan. I like it. It's simple. It keeps him effective and useful, and it has the right focus because 2023 and beyond is where we really should be thinking about Mitch White. Mitch can work on mechanics and perhaps adding another pitch in AAA right now. He has upside potential. Yes, he does. And finally, back to our previous conversation. Knuckleballers often had personal catchers. Bob Uecker was famous for that with Phil Niekro. Speaking of which, oh my goodness, the latest MLB The Show. First of all, thank you, Christian and Dulcimeris, for your comments. I really do appreciate that. Lots of insight, as always. But playing MLB The Show, I'm going to end with this little anecdote quickly. Playing with my son, and they have these two teams that you can get from like the turn of the century. Or whatever's. Anyway, so he was destroying me with Cy Young, just destroying me. And I said, okay, well, something's got to change. So I went and put in Phil Niekro, and in 5 innings, I had 17 strikeouts. That's not true, not 5 innings, but you know what I mean. It was hilarious. Anyway, Phil Niekro, one of the greatest to ever throw a ball, way better than that R.A. Dickey guy. Anyway. What's Thor doing these days? Anyway, We are at the end of episode 309 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. Don't forget, we've got Sunny Side of the Dome on. Are we doing Wednesday again this week?
Wednesday, yeah.
That's right. I wanted to make sure I got that out before we went off air, and of course tomorrow, the On-Fec Circle. Look at that! Somebody purchased himself some swag. And the profits from that purchase will go to the ALS Society of Canada. So thank you, Steve, for that. So we've got lots of great content coming at you on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, where you can comment like Dulcimeris and Christian. You can send your comments in and all of that stuff. As well, the audio version, Apple, Google, Spotify, anywhere you find podcasts, you'll find all three of our shows. The podcast, Sunny Side of the Dome, and the On-Fec Circle. We've got lots of Blue Jay stuff for you. Lots of great content for your eyes, for your ears, and your minds at jaysfromthecouch.com. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in this week. Thank you to Steve and Karen, as always, for making this my Mondays special. You make them what they are. So thank you so much to all of you. And to Christian and Dulcimeris for commenting, thank you so much. So for everybody here, for Steve, for Karen, for Alec Manoa, and I'm sure Velvet, Karen's cat, is somewhere around just waiting to make an appearance.
To the side, but then she jumped down. So.
She got tired of waiting. She's such a diva. Anyway, so this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle, and you don't miss it. So take care.